to describe how mead making differs from beer making then, not just in the procedures but in the theory as well?
Yeah, well, again, very similar to the wine making. Beer beer wort has its own nutrients. Usually, they're not needed. So it's something that you need to really get used to coming from a beer making background, that you have to add these nutrients. And if you use your own, one of the bad things about coming to mead from many years of either wine or beer, I would imagine, is you have your habits and you think you already know what you're doing, and a lot of the stuff doesn't translate over. The difference that I found is that, as opposed to when I was first getting into beer making back in the 1987, there's a lot more information out there now versus then, and one of the good things is that if you do a little bit of research, I mean, just basically 3-4 hours of research on the internet, mainly going through, getting a patron membership at Godmead and going through it, you'll probably make a great batch of mead on your first try, because all of it is there. Basically, that's what I did. Was I found Godmead and got a lot of really good advice on there before I made my first batch of mead. But as it differs, mead differs from beer in one main way, is that there really is no need to boil anything ever, and that's great. That's one of the things that I really enjoy about not making beer anymore, and the whole mindset of sanitation, which I think is a benefit for you if you come to mead from beer, because as a beer maker, you're psychotic about sanitation. It's very, very important to have everything spotlessly clean and sanitized, because they're not the same thing. Whereas mead is a lot more forgiving about that, and you also you have to, when you're making beer, you put your wort together, you pitch your yeast, and then you never touch it again until it's done. About anywhere between a week to 3 weeks later, this stuff about opening up the fermenter and going in there and stirring it, that was anathema to me. And it took a while for me to like really be comfortable 3 days into opening up the fermenter and stirring it up. But these are things that if you don't do your research, you won't do, and you'll leave it alone and to the detriment of the mead, because if you don't do that, you're gonna get those sulfur smells, you're gonna get all that nasty stuff. And I also found that when you make beer, very rarely, I never did it in 20 plus years, was blending the final products. I don't think I ever blended 2 beers to make a third better beer, which is one of the things that I really like about making mead, is that, and I'm sure wine is the same way, I think. Blending is really like a whole different aspect of the hobby that's just so much fun. And that's about it. I mean, there are some other little things, but there's a lot less paranoia. There's no boiling, the blend. That's about it. Really, those are the differences in a very large nutshell. I'll send it back to you.
Okay. Ryan, your first fermentation ever was mead about 1.5 years ago. Can you describe how you learned what you learned, and also now that you're starting to make wines, are you in a better position to make wine if you've already made mead?
All right. When I first got started, I didn't even know what mead was 1.5 years ago, and was coming home from vacation and accidentally kind of stumbled upon some, and I was just blown away how good it was. And I had planned on buying a bunch of beer equipment as soon as I got back home from vacation, And man, am I glad now that I ran into mead instead. So I went home and immediately started thinking about, wow, I'd like to learn how to make this. And I got on the internet and I watched a lot of YouTube videos, and I started making some of that stuff. And I didn't know any better at the time, but it was horrible. And I would drink it, and in a few hours after I was done drinking it, I'd wake up in the middle of the night with just the most splitting headache in the world, like somebody had taken a cleaver, just split my head in two.
Oh, dear.
And I couldn't figure out why. I was like, man, I'm not much of a drinker, but I shouldn't be getting killed like this. And it ended up not knowing at the time, but the stuff I was making was just full of fusel alcohols. And a little while later, I started running into some of the beer form, and there was a little bit of mead stuff in there, and eventually, within a month or two, I think, of getting started, I ran into Got Mead, and I stuck around there quite a bit, and I'm a ferocious reader, and so already I had started to learn everything I could from, the different online providers of equipment and all the ingredients, everything. And I was really swimming when I first started making things. I thought it was going to be, relatively simple and you just follow some recipes and toss some stuff in a bucket and all good. And as you know, you can do that if you're so inclined, but I've never been one to do anything with a passion and just do it on a surface level. And so I jumped into the science, and I was overwhelmed. I was just blown away, and what was extremely frustrating for me was that I would read one thing over here and something totally contradictory somewhere else. And it's like, well, how in the hell can you know what to do when everybody says this and that and nothing added up? And slowly over time, I started to get a feel for things and started to have some success and started, I guess in my own mind, coming to some conclusions that some of the things I was reading were ancient information, which now that I know better, you can look at something in 5 minutes, that it's really old school. I think Jack Keller's website helped me out quite a bit when I first got started.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah. And so it took a while, and I was really swimming, but I kind of enjoyed that kind of thing, and I just kept pressing on reading some more and asking questions. And boy, I can't tell you how informative getting on the patrons section of our forum is. I mean, I studied the Oscar in a nutshell stuff like I was going to be tested at the end of the month, and I read over and over and over and over all that stuff time and time again. And I guess that's a shout out for those of you that are listening that you're not members as a patron to our forum. You will save yourself many times over the cost of becoming a patron member by not tossing out mistakes, just by getting on there, and there's tons of proven recipes that, by far are worth way more than the little bit that we pay to become a patron.
So I should raise the price? Is that what you're saying?
Well, I newcomers all the time, but I don't see too many people becoming patrons, and I just think they don't realize what they're missing by, staying on the right side of the fence, so to speak.
Yeah. They're trickling in, but they're coming. So keep on. I'm sorry. I couldn't resist.
No, that's fine. So that's kind of how I came about it. I found myself starting actually. Well, I did buy one kit from a beer shop here in town, and it was just mix some honey with some water, toss in your champagne yeast, and a tablespoon of this, and put it in the bucket for 6 months, whatever. And I think that was the only kit I ever bought. Mead-wise, I did make a couple wine kits, and with your help, I actually learned didn't need to do that, and I just started buying individual ingredients. And right away I thought, man, you know what, to make a single gallon of this stuff and wait for how many months, and I could sit down with a friend and it'd be gone in one sitting. It just didn't even seem worth the effort and the time. And so right away I started making 3-gallon batches, and almost in no time those seemed too small, and I'm now making stuff in trash cans.
Yeah, those trash cans will get you. I come at it from the perspective of mead only, like you, Ryan, but I've been doing it for a hell of a long time. And what I saw was, when I started, I mean, got started as kind of a documentary of my efforts of mead making. And so I basically wrote up and put on the site what I had done. Most of it was bad at that point, but it was my learning experience. You know, I mean, it was how I, made progress, I guess, because people would come in and say, well, I did this and this worked, and I did this and this didn't work, and that kind of thing. And I was I started out when it was the pitch and wait crowd. It was throw it in the bucket, and like Manny was saying, open the bucket. Are you crazy? Put it in the bucket when it's done. It'll let you know. And you'd wait for the bubbler to stop bubbling, or to bubble less than X number per minute, and that meant it was done. And, what came out of the bucket was what you drank. And sometimes it gave you headaches, and sometimes it didn't. And it was, I've made some of my best meads were made that way. Some of my worst meads were made that way. But as I moved forward and started meeting people like Ken Schramm, like Pete, and people like that who did things differently, I started learning different things. And I learned, when we first started, it was all about, like AJ was saying, it was about the winemaking. You put in your malic acid and your tartaric acid and your, all of your acidic stuff, because that was what you were supposed to do. And so that's what we did. And again, sometimes it worked, sometimes not so much. And, fruit in the primary, fruit in the secondary, nobody talked about that. I'm sure they were talking about that in other places, but in the places I was looking, because I wasn't looking at wine, I was looking at mead, so I wasn't over on, on Jack Keller's site. I didn't go over there, because that was about wine. So I figured, well, what do they know about making mead? And as it turns out, I probably could have learned quite a lot, but it didn't occur to me. And so then I met, people who started pointing out things that I could try, and I started trying that. I still stuck with the pitch and wait, though. I resisted. I told people I was and it was so funny because I kind of sneered in my head at somebody that said this very thing on Facebook the other day. I was a seat-of-the-pants mead maker. And I would make it by feel. So I don't need any of these damn scientific methods. I don't understand the chemistry anyway. That was my way of looking at it. I still don't get the chemistry, but I understand that it has, a use now, and I pay attention. But everything changed over time. So now I'm using recipes like the bomb because they work. I've got any problem with using somebody else's something worked. I made heck, I've been making mead 10 years when I finally made a Joe's Ancient Orange, and I was astonished at how good it was. Compared to some of the stuff that had happened in the bucket that I wouldn't open. And even though you don't open it in a JAO, notwithstanding. But anyway, so I got to where I remember when I made my first one I made after Pete basically bullied me into using a fermentation management process, and it really opened my eyes. This was, I want to say, about 9-10 years ago. And I finally said, fine, will you stop bugging me if I do this? And he said, yes, I will. Now you're going to do it. So, and you've all either met or heard Pete, so you know that if Pete decides on something, you just give in eventually. It's just easier that way. But so I followed. I said, okay, fine. Help me develop a recipe. This is what I've got. This is what I've got for honey. This is what I've got for fruit. This is what I want to do. Help me create a recipe. And he did. And then I said, okay, so talk to me about nutrients. What do I need to add and when? And so I wrote all that down. And I said, okay, and you're always big on this whole stirring thing, so talk to me about that. What exactly is What exactly are these stages?